What are the most common medical secondary essay prompts? Hey, BMO Nation, welcome to another episode of our One Question podcast. My name is Ronza Nissan, a lead admissions expert here at BMO, and I'm joined with my colleague and another lead admissions expert, Meng Yang. So first and foremost, we have nothing to sell, just pure strategies and tips so everyone has, of course, equal access to education. Now, in case you've never watched or listened to one of these before, they're completely unscripted, right? So there's nothing fancy, no fancy music, nothing with visuals, no sound effects of that nature, just pure content. Now, we have 10 minutes to tackle a new topic each week. And this week, the topic is common medical secondary essay prompts. So I'm going to start the time right now so you see it. 10 minutes right there has started. So first and foremost, Meng, why are medical secondary essay prompts very important, and how can applicants prepare for them?
They are definitely a huge part of the application process in the States. If you're applying to any US medical school, and this is kind of the last hurdle you have to get over before you get that coveted interview invitation where you get that face-to-face contact. And these questions are unique because they are school specific. Every school has a different set of questions, and that's where they are really able to see how well you fit with their philosophy, their mission. They can ask the questions that they want to ask to gauge certain traits, specific traits that they weren't able to do at the primary application stage, where you were sending your application literally to every single school that you applied to. So your second part of the question was how to prepare for this stage of your application process. And I think that question actually might sound kind of funny to some people. What do you mean prepare for secondaries? I get them, I write them. What kind of preparation do I need to do? So I think it's a really good question, because you actually can do some prep before you even get the essay questions for a specific school. They're going to come at different times, but you can actually kind of anticipate what you're going to get. So one of the things that you can do is look up what the medical schools have sent out in terms of questions in previous cycles. Now, there is a caveat to this. You should never feel married to the questions that you find from those schools, because schools have full autonomy to be able to change their question sets, change the length of the answers that they ask for. They can change anything, right? Sometimes schools will send out a completely new set of questions on a given cycle. So you don't want to feel like you've done a lot of prep, written out full essays, and then have to redo a whole set of questions. But there's definitely a certain level of prepping you can do.
Absolutely. Now, I'm sure everyone's wondering, okay, so I've looked at last year's, and I know you just said that they might change this year. So what can I actually expect? Can you give me at least one or two prompts that are common and reoccurring that I could sort of gather knowledge on, put content down, and at least prepare for those?
Mm-hmm. One of the very common ones that actually makes sense for the secondary essays that you might get is a question asking you why you're interested in that school in particular. Because as I mentioned before, these are school specific questions. This is the first opportunity the school gets to gauge the fit between a candidate and their program. So that is a fairly common one. You may not see it for every school, but you can basically bet that it will be on at least some of the sets that you'll get. And even if it isn't, it's still a good question to think about and write down ideas for, because it is a common question when you get to the interview stage. So the prep that you do for this question is never going to be wasted, and you actually should know for yourself why you want to go to that school. So that's a really, really common one that I can think of.
Okay.
Maybe from your experience, you can also think of.
Yeah. Before we move on from that one, actually, Meg, so if I was an applicant and I said, okay, can I come up with a general answer for all of my schools? Is that something I could do to prepare for that question? What would you say to them?
Not for this question, because each unique program has school should have features that you are drawn to. Certainly there's overlap between medical schools just because they are the same kind of program, right? They're all medical schools. There's going to be some clinical training involved. You're probably going to have community service opportunities. Those kinds of things will be those themes will reoccur in your research when you look at different medical schools and what they offer. But for each medical school, they will offer those kinds of things in a different way. And you kind of want to zero in on the specifics of how the program is structured and think about the ways in which that might benefit your own medical education, your own medical training. Some programs have early clinical exposure, and some programs might have later clinical exposures. There are pros and cons to both of those, and depending on your own individual learning style, you might want to appeal to one or the other. In terms of community service, the other kind of example I gave, that's reoccurring, different programs will have different opportunities for you to work with different people groups in different communities and different settings, and there might be some that speak to you more than others. For example, maybe your own volunteering experience gave you exposure to a very particular group of people, maybe a low-income Hispanic community that you've worked with, and that's something that one of the programs that you've applied to also specifically offers. That connection there will really help you. Like, if you can express that in your answer, that will really help you to make a strong case for why you're a good fit for that program. And that's not something you want to generalize in your answer.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that, Mang. So I guess if you can take anything away from what Mang mentioned, is you need to prepare for that. You need to do your homework. You need to do some research. Yes, there's going to be overlapping themes, but there's no cookie cutter answer for all the schools, and they certainly shouldn't be, because that's a very important question. Now, another common question that I've seen from my experience, and sometimes it's directly asked, sometimes it's not, is there any additional information you want to provide to the admissions committee, or is there any gap or discrepancy? Now, if you've had any and you haven't had the opportunity to mention it in a primary application, this is a good opportunity to certainly disclose that information and do so in a way that's strategic, where you are taking accountability. And Mang, you can step in and add in more information here. But the best way I always tell any applicant, any student that I've worked with, is to make sure that you're just being genuine and honest, right? So if you've had any issues with your GPA or potentially taking the MCAT multiple times, that's okay. It happens, right? So just make sure that you own up to it and, clarify what happened, clarify how you tried to overcome it, whether that was taking on a tutor or whether that was really putting together a good study schedule. What did you learn from it, right? The whole premise behind that is they want to see what skill or what quality you've refined and how you could apply that when you are obviously studying in their program. Mang, is there anything else that you think applicants should consider when approaching that question?
I think you're absolutely right, Ronza. It's all about the learning process, and that they can see that you are an individual who can learn from errors. Nobody is perfect, and I think it's important to remember that. If you feel any kind of hesitancy about sharing any of these kinds of discrepancies, nobody has a perfect record, and medical schools recognize that, and all they want to know is that you are an individual who is open to growth, open to learning, and that's going to help you to succeed in their program, which is really important for them to gauge your ability to succeed in a medical program that is going to be challenging, where you are going to face more obstacles. Are you going to be that individual who can overcome that relatively easily and progress and succeed in their program, and then eventually be able to succeed and help others get over the very same hurdles and help your patients get over their hurdles?
Absolutely. Now we have less than a minute and a half left to go, Meg. I mentioned a question about what are some additional, or what is an additional information? What can applicants or students prepare for? What is something that they could include in that question that they haven't already mentioned?
In the discrepancy question, or in
anything additional to add, when they have, is there anything else you'd like the committee to know? What's something that could be included in a question prompt for that?
Oh,
Less than a minute.
Good response to that is something that highlights a trait of yours with an example that was nowhere else in your application. It could be a hobby, it could be something you've picked up that you've learned, it could be a challenge that you're facing recently, something that you've included with the explicit goal of demonstrating a trait that they will be interested in knowing that they have not seen anywhere else in your application.
Perfect. Okay, we have 30 seconds. If you could see that, I know it's blurred out, but we have less than 30 seconds. I'm going to stop the time right there. Thanks so much for watching or listening. If you like this video as much as, or if you've liked this content as much as we loved making it, go ahead and share it with a friend, subscribe so you don't miss any future episode, of course, and do so. Do ask questions if you have in the comment section, and we will see you next time.